It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
So my friends, it's starting. The election coming up in November. We're hearing it all. We're just totally being bombarded with so much information that sometimes it drives us crazy. But remember, my friends, we've said this many times, elections affect our lives. Just go to the grocery store today or your energy costs today and see what you're paying, insurances and everything else that's going through the roof, and you'll find out that elections are very important. So what I wanted to do today with our panel is to discuss what the local flavor is, like in northeastern Pennsylvania, other than national, because we can get that on national good networks that only will give you the truth. And you get that national flavor. Joining me on the team here is Charles McElwee, who is the Real Clear editor of Pennsylvania, and Rick Morelli, who is the former chairman of the Luzerne County Council and now on the election board. Thanks for joining us again, my friends.
Great to be here.
Good to see you, Sam.
The excitement starts. You know, it's really interesting. Let's talk about what is the local flavor? I just left the mall here. I like to talk to all the guys who are sitting around and women are around and get a feel for them as to, who they think and what they're thinking. And it's amazing how the diversity is. Let me start with you, Rick. Okay, you're certainly very much involved. So you have your finger on the pulse of what's happening. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, we are going into a historical election. When you take a look at, you have Donald Trump, former president, impeached twice, arrested, going through all these different hearings. Then you have Joe Biden, which we know they just came out of this debate that we'll get into a little bit more later on. It is going to be in the next few months, people just better settle in. And there's going to be a lot of conversations. There's going to be a lot of fights. There's going to be a lot of arguments and debates. And I think it's going to be like no time before. When you talk about local, and I do, I really, I enjoy talking politics, but just like you, I'd like to listen to people and get their thoughts and just to see if there's a pattern. First of all, the one thing that I hear a lot is people are still not sure if elections are fair. I mean, a lot of people still feel that in the last election that Trump was cheated, and you have the debates with the mail-in ballots and all that stuff, and that's definitely something people talk about. Why should I go vote, or things of that nature? That's one thing that comes up a lot. When it comes down to the candidates, I mean, right now as we speak, everyone's talking about the debate. They're talking about both candidates. They're talking about Biden's performance. There's talk about, well, is Biden going to stay in the campaign? So, those are all the things that people are talking about right now, and that's just kind of in general of what I'm hearing.
Charles, your reflection.
Well, Rick raised a point about voters in the area raising the question to themselves, why should I even vote? And I think that is an underrated challenge for actually the Republican Party going into the election this year, that there's a sense of disillusionment among many voters who have that perception of the 2020 election and therefore are either not inclined to vote or certainly not inclined to vote by mail-in spite of the state GOP's efforts to increase awareness about the validity of mail-in voting.
I find it interesting that every time Trump is on the campaign, he mentions about how the 2020 elections were rigged. He continues to say that. So I'm thinking to myself, well, why does he continue saying that if it's something that, people say it's not true, and everyone came out and said this, it was not rigged. I told you the story about what happened to me in Philadelphia after the election, bringing my dog to Penn Vet. I was there, and I have a sign on my car, Local News 13 and SSP TV. So this African-American, security guy comes up. It wasn't working for Penn Vet, but he was walking. He said, "Are you with the news?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Where?" I said, "In northeastern Pennsylvania." "Oh." He said, "Did you vote?" I said, "Yeah, I voted." He said, "I voted too." I said, "Well, good for you." He said, "Let me tell you what happened." I said, "What?" I went to the election. I went in, and I'm getting ready to vote, and I looked down and I saw two of my friends who were voting. So I said to the person, I said, "Well, two of these are two of my friends." They said, "Well," the lady said, "That's nice." And he says, "They're dead, and they are already voted." And he said, and what I did was I changed my vote. Now, he didn't say whether he voted for Biden or Trump. He just said, "I changed my vote." So why do you think he continues? I'll start with you, Red. Why do you think he continues to say that?
So I hear a lot of that. And again, I recently joined the election board, and one of the reasons why I joined was because of things like that, to find out what's true, what's not. I will say this, in the 6 months that I've been on the Luzerne County Election Board, I will say certainly I feel very confident that the elections are as fair as they could be and there's nothing going on. But with that said, I mean, our board is doing what they're supposed to, and they're going overboard. But what that said is that a lot of other places may not be doing that. I mean, you go back to that argument of someone was passed away. There's a big process that goes into trying to find out that they're dead, that they can't vote anymore. Do I believe that all other counties out there are doing that? No. So that can happen. And obviously, listen, if you're in a political area, they're obviously going to take advantage of that. So my point is that can it happen? Yeah, it can happen. If you don't have all the different processes in place to make sure things are fair, that's where things could go wrong. I mean, I think when you go back to Trump and his argument, and I don't know all the details, but you go back to the night before he was winning in those swing states of Wisconsin and Michigan, et cetera, and then hours later he's losing. So, it was never found that there was corruption, but obviously he has more information than we do. But the fact is that whether right or wrong, there is a debate out there about, now, and we deal with here in Luzerne County with these mail-in boxes where people could just drop off their ballots instead of mailing them in. And I do believe there's a challenge with that. I do believe that people can manipulate this. They could go out to an old age home, tell people what to vote, get their votes, and then I'll put them in. And that's called ballot harvesting. That's illegal. And that's something that we are looking at, and that is a concern out there because ballot harvesting is something that's illegal to do. And that's, I think, the direction of what Trump's trying to say is that they're going out, grabbing all these ballots from some places, and, they're all of a sudden getting these free
Why do you
votes.
think he continues to say that?
Because he's an undisciplined candidate when it all is said and done, that he is focusing on the past, and that's where he risks political liability moving forward. All attention is on Biden right now after the debate performance. But moving forward, the question will be, can Trump continue to campaign in a way that he has campaigned since the debate that deflects attention from him and puts attention on Biden? And Trump erases that attention if he brings out statements, for example, about the 2020 election. If he's talking about the past, if he's talking about how the election was rigged, that turns off far many more voters across the state and in the 7 consequential swing states than he perhaps realizes. But it's a political risk, and but one that he continues to believe.
We say facts are facts, and when you're looking at what's happening in the country, I mean, if you're telling a person they're living good and their credit cards to the roof and they can't, the kids cannot buy cookies or chips because they're in the grocery store and they're getting hit with the high prices, and of course the blame game is, blame the corporations, blame all those people, but don't blame yourselves. You're looking at the commercials today. When you're looking at Biden has a commercial now with the January 6th, looking at it as if it was a complete war, okay, and saying this is what Trump caused. you know, your thoughts on some of these commercials that we're seeing?
Well, I mean, it's marketing. It's at the point where there's a couple things. No, number one, and I'm going to go back to the election, like, all that comes from money, and money gets poured through. And people have to understand that when they're given to these campaigns, that's where their money's going. It's going to these ads, and a lot of times these the money goes into these PACs. And you can't go back to trace where the money's coming from. And obviously these PACs have agendas. And the other problem is that they could go out there, they could lie, literally lie, and you can't go back and find someone for smearing their name. And that's one of the problems with the election process all over the place.
Yes. Yeah.
But the fact is that, you know, people have to be smarter and read between the lines. Like you said, they're going to go back and say, like, what did we have a total war years ago? No, we had COVID, and we all know what happened and what was true and what wasn't, and read between those lines. And I think that's where the public has to see behind. I mean, you see these ads that they put, and they make someone look horrible
Oh my
and
God,
all that.
yeah,
It's sad, but that's where things are at
Nothing
now.
like having the candidate sitting down and I'm not pushing my show, but the point is they could sit here and you could see their expressions, you could see how they respond, etc. And some candidates don't want to come on the show.
And I've always said this, and I'm not saying because your show. I'm a big believer in that. I think there's nothing better than having someone come on the show or any other show or even the radio and talk and let them hear you and see what you're about. And when someone doesn't do that, I'm like, why would you not show yourself? Because you're here to sell yourself and what you're about.
Yeah,
it's
I like,
crazy.
you know, when I hear these from campaign, some of the, well, I have to get my team together, and that's okay. But where's your team from? You know, is a team from, you know, a person from graduated from New York with a, you know, or someone from Washington D.C., et cetera. It seems that sometimes they bring outsiders in instead of people that know what's happening in their own backyard. And I put up with that a long time when I'm talking to candidates. Of course, they have to pay, but the point is, it's amazing how uninformed they become because they surround themselves by people who don't really, well, excuse me, some of them do, but most of them, because they have a degree, you know, what you forgot, and you forgot in politics, some of these campaigns, their teams can't even come close to that. You say get to know the candidates, okay? It's so funny to me.
Well, again, a candidate's running on themselves. And when you go back to talking about a team, it's like you could have your team, you could run, and then we talk sometimes local school boards. It's you. You're the person. You're responsible for those ads. You're responsible for what you say. You're responsible for what you're going to do. And I think that going back to the point of advertisements, public needs to see exactly what that person's going to do. Because, like I said, let's go back to Biden and Trump. You know, I always ask, well, who are you voting for? Why? And then, and most of the time, the people who are voting for Biden, their answer is, well, I hate Trump. Okay, that's your right. But then I'd like to dig in and say, well, can you tell me just a couple of the things that he did that you really like? And a lot of times they don't say anything. And they're just like, I just don't like Trump. And they say, well, okay, he's going to bring us World War III. I'm like, okay, well, why didn't he do it last term? And I like challenging people like that just to see it. And the same thing with Trump. Like, well, what is it that you like? Well, you have to challenge both candidates and both people. And people have the right to vote however they want. But at the end of the day, are you doing the right thing for the future? I mean, again, being on the election board, I sit there and I see people writing in, I'm voting for Mickey Mouse, I'm voting for Donald Duck. Like, why are you wasting my time and their time? Just don't do that. Just don't. Let's vote for the right people and try to do what's right for the country, whether right or wrong. That's what's great about our country. Take advantage of this opportunity.
Charles?
You're right, and challenging both sides on those issues is critical. So, I mean, there are misperceptions on both ends of the political aisle. That's an age-old problem.
Charles, as editor of Real Clear, all right, how do you go about getting your information, all right, to present?
Well, Real Clear Pennsylvania is a daily curation of news and reporting across media outlets in Pennsylvania, locally, and also across the country that examine the overlooked political, cultural, economic trends in the state. And it's relentless research and reading and also talking to people across the state.
You do your own polling?
RealClearPolitics says it's the RealClearPolitics average of polls, including in Pennsylvania and Senate races as well.
Folks, I'm talking to Rick Morelli and Charles McElwee, part of our political panel. November is coming up, and you're going to get bombarded with a lot of things. You know, it's interesting. I'm watching TV last night, and I see these ads, St. Jude's Hospital, Shriners Hospital, kids who need help, and they're looking for $19 a month or $20 a month to help them. You know how much money is going to be spent on the election? Blown down the tubes, my friends. Maybe close to $1 billion. Why don't they take half of that money and put it to the hospitals and et cetera, and then just take half of that and put it to good use instead of the nonsense and bull that you hear every day. I thought about that. You know, why not help these people in our country that need it? Veterans who are homeless, and they're begging for $20 a month, $19 a month. And we're just blowing the money away in this nonsense that's happening in this country today. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. We're doing our political shows now, getting ready for November. Exciting time. Please know what the candidates are all about. Joining me is Rick Morelli and Charles McElwee. They're part of the team. Before we get into the senatorial race, Rick brought a good point about polling. You know, what was that question about?
Yeah, well, I mean, the fact that Charles here, but you know, now's the time where we look at and we hear this poll said this poll said that. My question is, how accurate are they? How much do we believe them when they're always within the margin of error? I mean, how much should people look into the polls, and how much do they sometimes mislead people? Like sometimes, you know, you might reach out to 2,000 people throughout the country. Okay, but we all know it comes down to each state and what parts of each state, right? So I don't know. That's just how I look at it. And the fact that Charles does this for a living, maybe he could
give us some input on that.
Well, the RealClearPolitics polling average, they examine, review, and showcase nonpartisan polling that, regardless of the margin of error questions that may be within those polls, provide a snapshot to the viewer of what the average may be in any given state or race. And of course there are questions about polling. We saw this most recently actually abroad. All indications were in England and France, for example, that one scenario was going to happen, then the opposite did. The left, for example, ascended in France, and all polling indicated that the right was going to do well. Same happened in Mexican elections recently, where the left did well. So just a reminder, we talked about like Brexit in 2016, how that preceded Trump's victory that year. The polling right now suggests that the Republicans are in a good spot, including in Pennsylvania with a Bloomberg Morning Consult poll recently showing that Trump was 7 points ahead. But those polls lead to improbabilities, but also overconfidence. And the GOP risks overconfidence based on the polling right now.
Let's get into the senatorial race. You have Casey and you have McCormick, all right? It's going to be a tough race because they want the Senate. Now, you're seeing the ads that Casey has, and you're seeing the ads McCormick has. I just was asking some people. We did a poll ourselves in northeastern Pennsylvania, and it seemed that in Luzerne County, were internal, just to get a flavor. You know, like I talked to people out here, and it's I think it was 100 and some people or whatever. Maybe 57% for Casey. Schuylkill County was more like of a 53, 50. McCormick did a little bit better in the area. But the question is, when you're looking at, the person said, well, you know, McCormick got his money, you know, how did he get all this money? He gave everything to China, et cetera. And here again, you know, what's the communication here? You know, so the question is, and from what I understand, Mr. McCormick will be coming on this show to, you know, let people know who he's about, and certainly Senator Casey's always welcome to come on the show as well. You know, what are your thoughts about that, Rick?
Well, I mean, First of all, you go to that election. Casey has a well-known name. He has a war chest of money that he's going to be hard to beat, and and he's going to come in here as a polished politician that we've seen and be able to talk about all the things he's going to want to tell you about and all the things he's said he's been successful about. I think in that election you're going to have McCormick, who's going to challenge him on kind of throw him into the liberal side of the equation and go back to what have you really done. And again, both of these guys are going to have to get that message out of and as to what's true, what's not. Not trying to take anything away from the voters, but I don't think the voters pay as much attention to when it comes to Senate or Congress as they will do with the presidential race. So it's going to be very tough to differentiate them on the issues versus who the individuals are.
Charles, your points on the senatorial race.
McCormick has a challenge in Pennsylvania, and it's driven in part by even locally. Let's not forget that Shapiro, when he ran for governor in 2022, he won not only Lackawanna County, which is still the third most Democratic county in the state, but also Luzerne County, which has consistently trended Republican. So it's a matter of where they can pick up margins. And in recent cycles, it's the suburbs that have become Bob Casey's electoral base. And we even saw that in 2018 in that Senate race. But can McCormick cut into the margins among independent voters, moderate voters who may be open to voting Republican again and had voted Republican in the past, for Toomey in 2016, for example, and then cutting into the disillusionment with the Democratic Party that is indisputable in this region itself, including with the fact that Luzerne County is on rapid pace of having a GOP voter registration majority.
So how much does your past performances count? In other words, I know people say he has the name, and that's perfectly all right. But Charles McElwee comes from a family, great people, but he could be a total bum. Yeah. Okay, I mean, but we were going to vote for McElwee because his grandmother, grandfather's mother's sister's brother, they have a wonderful name. But what has Charles McElwee done? And so when I look at what has Casey done since he's been there? All right, and there's on McCormick's website you can see it, and also on Casey. So it's the border. All of a sudden, he done so much for the.
Right, I agree.
What we don't see that results.
I mean, for me, when I go vote, obviously my number one thing is going to be the president, and then I know the fact that in order for the president to move his agenda forward, I need the Senate and Congress. So I'm going to follow a line, and most people should do that. Some people might say, well, I don't want all Republicans or Democrats leading, and they might say, I'll vote for this person here as a Republican, but I'm going to vote for a Democrat because I think they need balance. Some might do that. And again, most people will vote for a person because of where they came from, because they know the name, and not really get into it.
Is that...
It doesn't make sense.
Is that the way we run our country today? And we are suffering with high energy costs. We see it every day. Is that because Bob Casey has a well-known name and everyone loves him in Scranton? Everybody, and he's a nice guy. Okay, but what has he done? I can't understand this.
The name recognition has actually evolved in northeastern Pennsylvania. I mean, when his father died in 2000, for perspective, at that year, Hazleton's Latino population wasn't even 1%. Now it's the overwhelming majority. And really, where Republicans where they would have an opportunity would be Hispanic voters in the region who aren't engaged to vote. And statewide, there are 600,000 eligible Latino voters. And so if mobilized, they can really shift an election, whether it's a Senate or the presidential race. So the name recognition itself, it's not where it was in the 2000s or even when Casey was first elected to the Senate in 06.
Do you feel it's and my wife was a strong supporter for Bob Casey Sr., okay? I mean, he was a great guy. I mean, he was a pro-life person from A to Z. He didn't waffle like his son is doing. However, do you think that's best for our country even if it was McCormick? it doesn't make any difference. You vote for a person because of their name, Charles?
Well, I think that's diminishing with time because
I certainly hope it does.
Yeah, because I think younger voters.
I think, Rick, you're talking about exposing these people, all right? Expose them what they really are affecting
Well, they
our
have to
lives.
be challenged. Again, one of the issues that's most important to me is illegal immigration. And, I would use an example of, all right, well, Trump was for it years ago. Obviously, Democrats fought him against it. And then recently things flip-flopped. Biden just recently came out with something, and Democrats. And I'd be like, well, okay, Casey, if you're for this, why didn't you vote for Trump? Forget about he's a Republican, you're a Democrat. The issue's the same issue. How come you just didn't vote together? And that's part of the problem here is the party politics. They all want to be the heroes and say, I fought against you, rather than coming together.
I want to share something with you. There's a person running for state representative told me that about 2 months ago, a busload of immigrants was dropped off in Old Boston. These immigrants went through the town, robbing and causing all kinds of disturbances. The supervisors came in, etc. They don't know where they came from. Supposedly they're being housed in Scranton, with cell phones and whatever they have. And then I understand someone said that Scranton was planning to be a sanctuary city. Did you hear anything like that, or is that rumor?
I haven't heard anything about that,
Okay.
but I will say that the other day I was literally driving outside of the Laurel Mall here, and I saw a family of 5 sitting out there looking for money, and I felt bad, but I'm saying to myself, when have I ever here in Hazleton seen that? And I'm just assuming that these people came in from another country because they had nothing and they're doing that. And it's just a sad. And
it is sad.
It's sad.
And
all
there's so many
around.
people that really need our help,
Yep.
and there's so many people that we don't know. Listen, we didn't get to the congressional person. We're gonna have to do another show on that. We'll try to keep them informed. Sam at ssptv.com, my friend. Sam at ssptv.com. Invitations are out to all the candidates. I've extended invitations to Rob Bresniak, Cartwright, McCormick, Casey, anyone who has come out to just tell you what they're going to do. We'll see you next time.